My name is Caroline Bennett, and for the first 17 years of my adult life, I believed love was a quiet, predictable thing. It was the scent of coffee brewing in the morning, the familiar weight of my husband Michael's hand on my shoulder, the steady, comforting rhythm of a life built together in our small, green corner of Vermont. Our town, nestled in a valley that seemed to hold the mist long after the sun had risen, was the kind of place where seasons, not people, made the most noise. Life was a well-worn path, and I walked it with a sense of gentle contentment. Our marriage, like the old farmhouse we lived in, had its settled places and its drafts. There were silences that stretched a little too long, dreams I'd quietly folded and put away on a high shelf, but I told myself that was the nature of a long partnership. You smoothed over the cracks. You learned to live with the quiet. You chose to believe in the foundation. Michael was a good man, I thought. A bit distant, perhaps, often away on business trips for the architectural firm he worked for, but he was my anchor. He was my life. And then came the phone call that unmoored me from everything I knew. I never thought a phone call could ruin everything I believed about my life. But that morning it did. The sun had just started streaming through the kitchen windows when I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea. It was quiet, too quiet even for a Wednesday in Vermont. The fridge hummed gently. The floor was cool beneath my feet, and for a moment I let myself believe the world was still simple. I stood there sipping slowly, trying to remember if I had bought milk the day before. Michael had always reminded me about small things like that. He wasn't perfect. Our marriage had its cracks, but he was my husband. We'd been together for 17 years. We had routines, shared meals, a rhythm that I thought meant we were okay. Then the phone rang. It was one of those old landline phones with a shrill, jarring tone. I nearly spilled my tea as I rushed to pick it up. "Hello," I said, balancing the receiver on my shoulder. "Is this Mrs. Bennett?" The voice was male, formal, hesitant. "Yes," I replied, suddenly alert. My fingers tightened around the ceramic cup. "Who's this?" I'm calling from North Valley Medical. I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Your husband, Michael Bennett, he was in a car accident this morning. He didn't make it." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. The world went silent, the hum of the fridge, the birds outside, everything just stopped. I waited for another sentence, something to soften the blow, to make it less real. But it didn't come. Only silence and the sound of something sharp breaking inside me. "What?" I whispered. "No, there must be a mistake. He just left for his business trip last night." "Are you sure it's—" "I'm very sorry, ma'am," the man continued, and I could tell he was struggling, too. "There's more you should know." My heart was pounding, a frantic bird trapped in my chest. My knees felt weak. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table, the chair legs scraping across the tiles like a scream. "What? What else?" "He wasn't alone in the car," the man said, his voice dropping. "There was a woman. She also died at the scene." I didn't say anything. The world, which had stopped, now began to spin, slowly and sickeningly. We identified her as a woman named Erin Mitchell. "We believe she was involved with your husband." A sound left my throat, dry, breathless, and unfamiliar. Not quite a gasp, not quite a cry. He hesitated again, and I already knew what was coming, like watching a nightmare unfold in slow motion. "We discovered they have children. Twin daughters. They're 6 years old. Their next of kin is unclear. We're reaching out to extended family, but we thought you should know." I dropped the cup. It shattered against the floor, the pale tea staining the white tiles like old blood. My hand was trembling, my whole body shaking with a cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. Michael had children. Twin daughters. With another woman. And I never knew. The world spun. The walls seemed to tilt, and I had to grip the edge of the table just to keep myself grounded. My ears rang, my vision blurred. The man kept talking. He said something about legal procedures, about next steps, but his voice was just noise now, like static in a room that no longer felt like mine. I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember how long I sat there staring at the broken porcelain on the floor. Minutes, hours, maybe. I only remember one thought pulsing in my head like a drumbeat. Michael was dead, And he had lied to me about everything. How could I have been so blind? He wasn't just unfaithful. He had an entirely separate life. A woman, children, secrets so big they could crush me. And they did, over and over, like waves that wouldn't stop. Eventually, I forced myself to move. I swept up the shards, tossed the tea-soaked towel into the sink, and stared out the window at the street we used to walk together. It looked the same, calm, normal. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, hoping something had been lost in translation, hoping it was some cruel mistake, but deep down I knew it wasn't. Michael was gone, and the man I thought I knew had never really existed. There was a knock on the door later that afternoon. A social worker. She had kind eyes, soft words, and two terrified girls holding each other's hands behind her. They looked like little ghosts, pale, trembling, too quiet for children their age. I knew their names before she said them. Lily and Grace. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just looked at them. One had Michael's dark, serious eyes. The other had a delicate, upturned nose I didn't recognize at all. And something in me, something beneath the rage and the grief, cracked. They weren't to blame. They were innocent. And now they had no one. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Not because of Michael, but because of the way Lily, the one with his eyes, had looked at me, hopeful, scared, and somehow trusting, like she was asking for something, even if she didn't know what it was. I didn't know what I would do. I only knew this. If I turned them away, I'd be no better than the lies he left behind. And I was done living in his shadow. The funeral was small, quiet, almost hollow. Michael's side of the family, what little there was of it, showed up in black suits and stiff handshakes, barely meeting my eyes. They offered condolences that felt like apologies. Aaron's relatives weren't there. No one claimed the girls. No one stepped forward to speak for them. It was like their parents had vanished and the world had simply moved on, leaving these two small souls standing on the edge of an abyss. I stood under a gray sky, the wind tugging at my coat, watching two tiny girls cling to each other beside a casket they were too young to understand. Lily's hand never left Grace's, and Grace didn't look at anything but the grass at her feet. They didn't cry. That was what broke me the most. Children should cry when they lose everything. These two had already learned not to. The social worker approached me again after the service. She spoke of temporary foster care, of paperwork and protocols, of resources that could be tapped into. But I wasn't really listening. I was staring at Lily's shoes, pink sneakers with a tiny rip along the side. I don't know why that's what made it real for me. Not the death, not the betrayal, but that torn little shoe on a girl who had no idea who I was, or what I was to the man she called her father. And yet, something inside me, a voice I hadn't heard in years, said, "Don't let them go." So I didn't. That evening I brought them home. My house wasn't childproof. It smelled like lavender and old wood polish, not crayons and cookies. I had no toys, no extra toothbrushes, no bedtime stories memorized. But I made space. I cleared out the guest room, washed the sheets that had been folded in the linen closet for years, and set out two stuffed animals I found in a box from when my niece visited. I had no idea what I was doing. I was a 42-year-old woman whose greatest responsibility until that morning had been remembering to water the hydrangeas. Now I was facing two broken hearts I had no right and no clue how to mend. But I couldn't let them disappear into the system. The first few weeks were a study in silence. Lily, the older twin by 7 minutes, asked questions about everything, her voice small but persistent. "What time is dinner? Could I have a night light? Do you know how to braid hair?" She was trying to map out this new, terrifying territory to find its rules. Grace, on the other hand, barely spoke. She watched me with wide, searching eyes from behind her sister, a silent observer of my every move. She spent hours alone, drawing in a little spiral notebook she'd somehow managed to bring with her. Her sketches were surprisingly good: houses, trees, animals, always in pencil, always with gentle, careful shading. She never showed them to me, but sometimes she'd leave one on the kitchen counter, folded neatly with no name. I hung them on the fridge anyway, beside my grocery lists and a magnet from a place I'd never been. I didn't tell anyone at first, not my coworkers at the library, not my closest friends. The truth felt too jagged, too heavy to share. Eventually, word got out. A few neighbors gave me odd looks at the grocery store. One coworker whispered, "You're stronger than I'd ever be," as if pity and admiration came in the same breath. But I didn't need their understanding. I just needed the girls to feel safe. I wasn't ready to explain what had happened or why I'd made the choice I did. The questions would have been endless. Aren't they his lover's kids? Why would you take them in? Don't you feel betrayed? Yes. I felt betrayed, devastated, hollowed out. But I couldn't punish two innocent girls for Michael's lies. They didn't ask to be born into a secret. And the truth was, in a strange, unexpected way, I needed them too. They gave my mornings purpose, my evenings structure. My grief had been shapeless and suffocating until they arrived. Now it had hands to hold, little shoes to tie, voices calling from the hallway asking if it was okay to open the pantry. They grounded me, whether they knew it or not. Of course, not every moment was sweet. There were tantrums born of fear, nightmares that left sheets damp and a small body trembling in my arms. There were silent dinners where no one knew what to say, the clink of our forks the only sound in the cavernous quiet. I burned dinner more than once. Lily cried when I accidentally washed her favorite pink shirt with bleach. Grace got sick and refused to let me touch her forehead with a thermometer, flinching as if my touch might burn. I doubted myself daily, hourly. Was I doing enough? Was I the right person? Would they ever see me as more than the woman their father had lied to? I found myself Googling parenting forums late at night, searching for answers in digital threads written by strangers who knew nothing about my life. But every morning I got up, made breakfast, brushed hair, packed lunches, and tried again. Eventually, slowly, things started to shift. Lily began sitting next to me on the couch instead of across the room. Grace started humming when she colored small, tuneless sounds, but sounds nonetheless. They began calling me Miss Caroline at first, then just Caroline. Then one day, Grace, reaching for the syrup, slipped and said, "Mommy," before catching herself. She looked mortified, her cheeks flushing red, but I didn't correct her. I just smiled and passed her the pancakes. By the end of that first year, we had routines. We had inside jokes. The girls grew into the space, and the space grew around them. I bought bunk beds with glow-in-the-dark stars on the frame. They picked out their own blankets. Lily chose sunflowers. Grace chose a deep forest green. One night, as I tucked them in, Lily whispered, "Do you think Daddy can see us?" I froze, my hand hovering over her blanket. Then I knelt beside her bed and said softly, "Maybe. But I think he'd be proud of how brave you are." She nodded, her eyes wide in the dim light of the hallway. That was the last time she asked about him for a long, long while. I still cried sometimes, alone in the laundry room with the hum of the dryer and a towel pressed to my face. The betrayal hadn't vanished, but it was no longer the center of my story. These girls were. And I was no longer just surviving. I was becoming their mother. Years passed quietly, each one marked by back-to-school nights, birthday candles, and scraped knees. By the time Lily turned 14, she had already started managing the family grocery list with a precision that baffled me. Grace filled sketchbooks faster than I could keep up with, her drawings now bursting with color and life. I wasn't just raising children, I was witnessing them become themselves. We had favorite songs we sang off-key in the car. We baked cookies that always came out a little too hard on one side. We danced in the living room to songs from the radio on rainy Saturday afternoons. The girls called me Mom now. It had slipped into our lives gradually, like the way winter becomes spring. You don't notice the first warm breeze until it's already wrapped around your skin. I never asked for it. I never dared to expect it. But when it came, it felt right. It felt like home. I kept working my 2 jobs, mornings at the town library, evenings cleaning offices downtown. I kept saving, kept the house warm and the fridge full. But in doing so, I let go of a lot of things too. My dreams, mostly. Years ago, before Michael's lies had surfaced, I dreamed of opening a small cafe. A place with worn wooden floors and mismatched chairs, where the air smelled of cinnamon and books. I wanted to feed people, not just their stomachs, but their hearts. I'd even started a business plan, tucked away in a binder on the top shelf of my closet. But after the girls came, that dream felt like an indulgence I couldn't afford. There were moments I wanted to bring it up, when I saw a vacant storefront on Main Street or read about a new bakery in a magazine, but then Grace would need new art supplies, or Lily would need gas money for the drive home from her part-time job, and my dreams would quietly fold themselves back into the cupboard. It didn't feel right to want something for myself, not when their futures were my priority. Some nights, I'd pass by the spice rack and touch the glass jar of cinnamon, wondering if it still smelled the same. But I didn't open it. I didn't let myself. We didn't talk much about Michael, not because we avoided him, but because he had simply faded. For the girls, he was a photograph on the mantelpiece, a vague memory of a voice, a shadow of someone they might have known. I never gave them the ugly details. I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to pass on the bitterness that had taken me so long to release. But the questions came anyway. One evening, just as the sun was dipping below the maple trees out back, Lily looked up from her dinner and asked, "What was he like?" I paused, my fork frozen in the air. Grace looked at me too, her expression unreadable. Lily clarified, "Our father. I mean, you never really talk about him." I felt my throat tighten. This was the conversation I had been dreading and preparing for 16 years. I took a sip of water I didn't need and set the glass down carefully. Then I said the only thing I could. He was a complicated man. He loved you, but he made mistakes. What kind of mistakes? Lily asked, her gaze steady. I looked at her face, so much older now, but still carrying the softness of that 6-year-old who once asked if I knew how to braid hair. And Grace, sitting quietly across the table, her eyes like questions I wasn't ready to answer. I could have deflected. I could have told them something vague and comforting. But after all these years, they deserved more than that. They deserved the truth, even if it hurt. He had another life, I said, my voice quiet but clear. He was married to me when you were born. I didn't know about you. I didn't know about your mother, Aaron. I found out everything after the accident. The room was quiet. So quiet, I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Then Grace spoke, her voice barely audible. "So, you're not our real mom." The words, though gentle, landed like a punch to the gut. My heart cracked open. Slowly, painfully, I reached across the table, taking both their hands in mine. Their hands were bigger now, one long and elegant like a pianist's, the other strong and capable. "Maybe not by blood," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "But I have loved you every single day since the moment you walked through my door. I am your mother in every way that counts." No one said anything. The sound of the clock ticking filled the silence. I waited for them to pull away, for the anger or confusion to rise, but they didn't. They just held my hands, their grips firm. Still, the days that followed were hard. There was more silence than usual. No music during dinner, no jokes in the car. Lily grew quiet, retreating into her schoolwork with a fierce focus. Grace spent more time outside, sketching under the porch light, or disappearing into her room without saying goodnight. I respected their space. I didn't push. I knew they needed time to untangle what they had just learned, to reconcile the father they had imagined with the man he really was, and to figure out what that meant for us. A week later, as I was chopping vegetables in the kitchen, Lily came in and leaned against the counter, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. "Mom," she said softly. I kept chopping, waiting. "I've been thinking about what you told us. About Dad. About everything." I looked up. "I was angry at first," she admitted. I thought, why didn't she tell us sooner? Why didn't she just lie? But then I realized, you never owed us a fantasy. You gave us a home. A real one. You've always been there, for every scraped knee, every test, every stupid high school drama. That's what matters. I dropped the knife on the cutting board and pulled her into a hug so tight I thought I'd never let go. The tears came fast, a torrent of relief, grief, and overwhelming joy, all tangled together. "I love you so much," I whispered into her hair. You and Grace, you're my whole world." Grace stood in the doorway, watching. She didn't speak, but after a moment, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around us both. "We love you too, Mom," she whispered. And just like that, the silence lifted. We didn't erase the past. We didn't pretend the truth hadn't stung. But we had stitched something stronger over the wound, something unbreakable. We were a family, and that truth was ours now, built not on lies or secrets, but on shared love and hard-won trust. The years that followed felt both fast and heavy. We celebrated graduations, endured heartbreaks, and got through flu seasons and late-night study sessions. I watched Lily blossom at the State University, acing her accounting classes and finding a quiet confidence I'd always known was in her. Grace, at a smaller art school 2 towns over, was turning her love for sketching into something tangible, majoring in interior design and filling our house with fabric swatches and paint samples. I had done what I promised myself I would do all those years ago. I had raised them as my own. And yet, something in me had gone quiet. I still woke before dawn, made the same breakfast, and worked my shifts. My body carried the years, sore knees, dry knuckles, eyes that stayed open too long after midnight. But I never let them see that part. I smiled. I asked about professors and parking tickets. I saved every dollar I could for their tuition. The idea of my cafe had faded into something private, a whisper in my own mind. Not quite dead, just buried under obligation. Then one night, as we sat around the dinner table eating Grace's over-salted stir-fry and laughing about it anyway, she put down her fork and asked, "Mom, if you could do anything, just for you, what would it be?" The question landed softly, but it hit something deep. I blinked. "What do you mean?" "If you didn't have to think about money, or time, or anyone else," Grace said, her eyes serious, "what would you want for yourself?" I looked between the two of them, these incredible young women who were my entire life. And for the first time in years, I let myself answer truthfully. "I used to dream about owning a cafe," I said, almost laughing at how foreign the word sounded. "A small one. Cozy. Somewhere people could come and sit and feel like they belonged. I've always loved feeding people. Not just their stomachs, but their hearts." Lily smiled slowly. "Why didn't you ever do it?" I shrugged, a familiar weight settling on my shoulders. Life. Bills. Timing. And then I had you too. You became the dream. They exchanged a look. It was subtle, quick, but I noticed. I didn't think much of it at the time, just assumed they were touched by the sentiment. I didn't know, couldn't have known, what they were already planning. Weeks went by. I kept working. They kept smiling in ways that made me suspicious. Grace started asking me random questions about paint colors and kitchen layouts. Lily began asking about recipes I hadn't cooked in years, for scones and breads I used to make before my life changed. I chalked it up to curiosity, but something was happening just beneath the surface of our lives. I didn't realize how serious it was until one Sunday afternoon. I came home from the grocery store and found them whispering in the living room with a laptop open between them. When they saw me, they jumped, literally jumped, and slammed it shut. I laughed. "What are you two up to?" "Nothing," they said in unison, too fast. That's when I knew something was coming. I just didn't know how big it would be. It had started as a joke one evening, Grace sketching a fake cafe logo on a napkin, Lily running mock numbers on a spreadsheet. But slowly, it became real. They set up a joint savings account. Every extra dollar from internships, scholarships, and freelance gigs went into it. Grace took on small design projects for local businesses after class. Lily helped a local bakery rework their budget in exchange for financial consulting experience. They pulled everything they had, every penny they'd saved since they were teenagers. They started scouting locations, quiet streets, little corners, anywhere within walking distance from home. They ruled out a dozen buildings before finding it, an old brick storefront with ivy climbing up the side and tall windows that caught the morning light just right. It had been a dusty antique shop for decades. They signed the lease. Lily, with her head for numbers and contracts, managed the legalities. Grace, with her artist's eye, started sketching designs before the paint was even dry. They wanted it to feel like me. Warm colors, open shelves, a kitchen where the oven could be seen from the tables. Vintage plates hanging on the wall, a bookshelf near the window for people who liked to read alone, a corner booth with a patchwork cushion, just like the old armchair I used to sit in after work. Everything was chosen with care, with a love so deep it was woven into the very fabric of the place. They kept it a secret for almost 4 months. I had no idea. I was too tired, too busy, too caught up in the rhythm of daily life to notice all the signs. Until one night, Lily came into my room and said, "Don't make dinner tomorrow. We want to take you somewhere." I raised an eyebrow. "Where?" "It's a surprise." The next evening, they picked me up in Grace's beat-up car. I wore my good shoes, the ones I usually saved for parent-teacher conferences. We drove in a comfortable silence, both girls grinning too wide. When we pulled up in front of the building, I didn't understand. It was unfamiliar, yet felt known. Clean, newly painted. A soft yellow light glowed from the windows. A simple, elegant wooden sign hung above the door. And on it, in dark, hand-painted letters, was written, "Caroline's Hearth." I stared at it, not breathing. The name. My name. Grace took my hand, her own trembling slightly. "Come on, Mom. Let us show you." I followed them through the front door, my legs unsteady. The moment I stepped inside, I knew. This place wasn't just a gift. It was love made tangible. The air smelled of cinnamon and vanilla and fresh paint. Light jazz played from hidden speakers. The counter was polished wood, the shelves lined with jars of tea and fresh herbs. A small group of people, friends, neighbors, faces I knew from the library and the grocery store, stood in the back, smiling and waving as we entered. I couldn't finish the sentence. My throat was too tight. Lily stepped forward, her voice shaking with pride. "It's your cafe, Mom. We built it for you." I covered my mouth with both hands, a sob escaping. My legs felt weak, and I leaned against the counter for support. "You gave us everything," Grace said, her eyes shining. "You gave up your dreams for us. It was time we gave one back." Tears filled my eyes so quickly I couldn't stop them. I walked around the space, touching the smooth wooden tables, running my hand along the cool countertop, opening drawers that were already stocked with spatulas and whisks. The oven was the same brand as the one in our kitchen at home. The plates were mismatched, just as I'd once described. It was perfect. It was my dream, pulled from the dusty corners of my mind and brought to life. "I don't know what to say," I whispered, turning to face them. "I don't think I've ever been this surprised in my entire life." Grace smiled, her own tears now falling. "We hoped it would feel like home." I laughed, wiping at my cheeks with the back of my hand. "It does. It absolutely does." And for the first time in a very, very long time, I felt like the dream I had given up on had been waiting for me all along. The grand opening wasn't grand in the way most people might imagine. There were no press releases, no photographers, no line of influencers waiting to post reviews. It was simple, honest, and perfect. The morning of, I wore a navy blue apron with my name embroidered across the chest, "Caroline's Hearth," a gift from Lily, folded carefully on the front counter. Grace had arranged a bouquet of wildflowers in a mason jar beside the register, and soft morning light poured through the windows, just the way she'd imagined when she first saw the building. I stood at the door while guests trickled in, neighbors, friends, people who had seen me at the grocery store for years and never known my name. A woman who remembered me from the Parent-Teacher Association. A man whose mother I used to care for during her hospice days. They smiled, they hugged me, they sat down quietly. The smell of my cinnamon rolls and fresh-baked bread wrapped around them like a blanket. Lily managed the register with calm efficiency. Grace floated from table to table, adjusting vases and making sure every detail whispered welcome. And I stood behind the counter, my hands trembling slightly, until someone ordered the first cup of coffee. Then I moved. And everything made sense again. It was like I had stepped into the version of myself I had buried long ago. Measuring flour by feel, moving with the innate rhythm of the kitchen, giving smiles with the food and warmth with every plate. I wasn't just cooking. I was offering pieces of my heart. People lingered. They stayed long after their coffee was cold. They leaned into the windowsills, reading, laughing softly, or just staring out into the sleepy Vermont street like they had found a second home. That night, when we locked the doors and flipped the sign to closed, I stood alone in the center of the cafe, turning in slow circles. It was real. It was mine. And I hadn't done it alone. The days that followed moved in a quiet, beautiful rhythm. Business grew, not explosively, but steadily. Word of mouth spread. Someone posted photos online, and soon we had people driving in from the next town just to try the peach scones or to sit near the bookshelf in the corner. Lily and Grace worked shifts with me when their schedules allowed. We were a team. Lily took over the books and logistics. Grace redesigned the menu board weekly with her beautiful, hand-lettered chalk art. Every Saturday, they let me experiment with one new dish, whatever I wanted. Sometimes it flopped, sometimes it sold out before noon. But they always insisted I try again. The cafe began to expand, not in size, but in soul. It became a vessel for other people's stories. A couple who'd lost their child came every Sunday, always ordering the same tea and sitting at the same table in the back. A man recovering from a stroke learned to speak again over muffins and daily crossword puzzles with a patient friend. A group of retired teachers gathered in the back corner every Friday with card games and knitted scarves. No one ever hurried here. That was the unwritten rule. One afternoon, a customer told me, "There's something in the air here. It feels like kindness." I didn't answer. I just smiled. Because what could I say? Kindness was all we had started with, and it was enough. As months turned into years, I began to let go of the kitchen a little more. I trained a young woman named Zoe to take over my morning prep shifts. She was quick, kind, and curious, and she reminded me of Grace at that age. I stepped back slowly, watching the cafe move without me at its center, and realized it didn't need my constant presence to be full of love. That was when I started thinking about the future. One evening, as we wiped down the tables and counted the last of the day's tips, I looked at Lily and Grace and said, "I won't be able to run this place forever, you know." They both stopped moving, their eyes on me. "I wanted to stay in the family," I continued, my voice steady. "When the time comes, I want you two to take over. Not just the name, but everything this place stands for." Grace smiled first. "We were waiting for you to say that." Lily nodded, a business plan already forming behind her eyes. "We've already started planning some ideas for expansion, but only if you're ready." I felt a lump form in my throat. "I'm not sure I'll ever be fully ready to let go," I admitted. "But I trust you." And I meant it more than anything. In the years that followed, I gradually handed over the reins. The cafe continued to grow under their care. They added a second location across town, then a tiny mobile truck that served festivals and farmers markets. But they never changed what mattered. They kept the shelves open, the air warm, the music soft. They kept the scones flaky and the coffee strong. They kept the soul. And they kept my name on the sign. Now, I spend most of my mornings in the corner booth near the window. My spot. I have a cup of tea, a fresh croissant, and a notebook I rarely write in anymore. I greet customers who don't know who I am. I listen to conversations that float by like wind chimes. Sometimes I watch Lily managing staff with a clipboard in hand, her expression one of quiet authority. Other times I see Grace guiding a young designer through fabric samples near the far wall. I don't interfere. I don't need to. They've got it. We never speak much about how it all began. Not about Michael, not about the secrets, the betrayal, the pain that once threatened to bury us all. But the truth is, we don't need to revisit it, because we didn't build our life on what he left behind. We built it on what we chose to create, every day after. And that is everything. Looking back, I realize I never just opened a cafe. I built a home, not for the town, not even just for my daughters, but for the woman I had to become after I lost everything I thought was real. A woman who didn't quit. A woman who learned that family isn't what you're given, it's what you grow. Caroline's hearth wasn't just a building or a business. It was the last piece of a puzzle I didn't know I was still solving. And in this little place, built from the ashes of a lie, I found not only my dream, I found the proof that love, real love, always finds its way. Even after everything. It just might show up at your door holding a tattered notebook, wearing a ripped pink shoe, and asking for nothing more than a place to be safe.